Honorable Agriculture Secretary William Dar, Dr. Bernard Villegas, UPLB Chancellor Jose Camacho Jr., my colleagues at the Manila Times, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Manila Times, welcome to today's Business Forum, Prospects for Agriculture Beyond the COVID Pandemic. This is an appropriate theme given that our collective attention is now turned toward recovery from the impact of this health crisis. At our last event, our keynote speakers shared their forecast of a robust growth in 2021. Their message was reassuring for sure. GDP growth outlook this year is between 6.5% and 7.5%, and inflation is projected to be benign around 4%. Of course, the situation remains fluid. Just recently, we saw an alarming surge of new COVID-19 cases that has triggered new recommendations, if not fears, of another hard lockdown. That, of course, will deal a blow to the rosy economic prospects for this year and beyond. I believe that we are not alone in hoping that the recently mandated bubble over Metro Manila and some of its adjacent provinces will be enough to arrest this new wave of cases. That would allow the country to continue moving forward to recovery. If the country is to realize its economic targets, key industries and sectors will need to perform. Perhaps the most important sector is agriculture, which is naturally why we are all gathered here today. We hope to hear from our speakers their outlook for this vital sector and perhaps its expected contribution to the total economy. We expect that the discussion today will also cover the threats of the forecasted growth, including issues with food supply that may be responsible for the cost-push inflation seen of late, as well as related supply chain concerns that have a similar effect. Perhaps we should even hear some policy recommendations that will address development aspirations, including food security. As you see, we have a substantive topic to cover today, and like you all, I am eager to hear from our speakers.
The world has changed tremendously as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Food security concerns has not been spared by the pandemic. The fight against COVID-19 pandemic continues. It is now leading us into a new world, a new environment, a new normal. So I would like to start from a global perspective. What have been the impacts of COVID-19 in agriculture? I think everyone is aware that there have been disruptions in food supply, not only last year, but that continues up until today with all the lockdowns of countries. There are cross-border and domestic restrictions of movement of food. Now, with the GCQ even now coming back for NCR plus, that's the bubble today. We are monitoring the movements of food supply, particularly those coming from the provinces. Labor shortages are occurring because of the lockdowns. There are many requirements. Border closures are there. Hundreds of thousands of seasonal workers cannot reach their respective areas. And so open on with the fight against COVID-19, the shortages for labor really is a major impact. And when you have labor shortages, of course, there is reduction in job quality in the sector, job destruction, especially at the base of the supply chain. And much more, we are seeing the poorer sector of the economy, or any country for that matter, being affected by all these lockdowns. And so they don't have enough capital even to buy their own food for 3 square meals a day. Now, further food wastage is happening due to restrictions on movement, which prevented farmers from accessing markets. Of course, I would like to qualify that there have been improvements over time, but with the second surge of the COVID-19, you will see how, again, this would continue to be so, food wastage. Then, of course, the livelihoods of millions of plantation workers engaged in export-oriented and labor-intensive agricultural production in most of the developing countries have been affected and will continue to be so. And even, for example, with the present GCQ happening, with the increasing number of COVID-19 cases, offices in agriculture are also, experiencing the same impact in terms of increasing COVID-19 cases. And so you need to reduce and would also affect the productivity of various offices in not only government but private sector for that matter. So in a number of cases, there are spikes happening, not only locally, but even globally as a result of, again, many of these countries stockpiling. And of course, the international trade is distorted. And so panic buying as a result of all of this. And in the country today, the prices spikes because of also another important issue like the African swine fever. Pork prices have been badly affected, and because of the thinning inventory that we have in the pork industry. Now, in regard to the number of people in extreme poverty because of COVID-19, there is increasing number or additional 88 million people have been pushed into extreme poverty. And of course, in a worst case scenario, this will increase even to 115 additionally. And again, poverty is related to hunger. If you don't have money to buy your food, then the hunger stalks. Now, what have been put in place since last year and continue to be an important, program umbrella? We call it Plant, Plant, Plant program. And Plant, Plant, Plant program is an encompassing program, not only for crops, but for livestock, poultry, and fisheries. Of course, if you compare the budget today, this year, between that of last year, there have been an increasing level of budget. But if you look at the parity principle, if we say 9 to 10% contribution of agriculture to the economy, we are only getting between 2 to 2.5% of the annual national budget. So we really have to increase our energy, and Plant program has become the platform to really encourage everyone, all the stakeholders, for this very goal during this pandemic to increase food sufficiency levels due to the very reasons I have mentioned earlier about the distortions of trade, the lockdowns, and many other constraints along the way. So we continue to have these interventions, and we believe that major activity have been in terms of linking the producers to the market, to the consuming public, is one major important intervention that we have put in place last year, and we will continue to do so. Even urban agriculture, which was even implemented before the coming of COVID-19, that has now shown its potential to really bridge or narrow the gap in terms of the availability of food in the urban areas during problems of, say, movement of food or lockdowns for that matter. So, in general, as I've said, while the energy level was there last year, we will continue to do much, much more with timely and proper implementation of the existing banner programs and the new projects that have been approved under this plan program. Now, this would be one of the last slides I would like to highlight. All these strategies that I have been mentioning are all put in place in a one diagram. We call this Transforming Philippine Agriculture 1DA Agenda. Of course, it's not only the DA that will have to make it work. It will include multi-stakeholdership, much more the private sector coming forward to invest so much in the agriculture. Now, the strategic communication will always be necessary for us to make this possible. But we group them into 4 pillars, from individual key strategies that you have on the left side. There are agrupations of these into 4 pillars. And the first group is called the consolidation of farming. So Bayanihan Agri-Clusters is a farm clustering approach that we will do. We have set in place the guidelines with which common service facilities will be a major approach so that extension and technology transfer can be much more effective and efficient. We are also enhancing province-led agriculture and fisheries extension systems. We have 16 provinces now being piloted to do really decentralized, collaborative agriculture and fisheries extension system. The Department of Agriculture will only be a catalyst and a facilitating institution helping the province to make it possible. Now, it's already necessary for cooperatives development to be, pursued. Collective action is necessary, and we need to really engage with our partners so that, like the local chief executives, are really the ones that are the food security stars at their own right, at their own level. And diversification of agriculture is necessary, not just the rice-centric agriculture that we have mostly today. So there is a transformation towards crop diversification or agricultural diversification. Then one thing we need not forget is the availability of credit, because in most of the farmers today and fishers, they are indebted always to the traders or the wholesalers dictating the prices during harvest. And so we need to really disentangle this, relationship towards, the farmers having to be part of a collective so that they have more leverage to be given all the empowerment support for that matter. And the second pillar of this 1DA agenda is modernization. It has been before and will continue to be so. Technology and innovation, including digital agriculture, precision agriculture, name it. We need to now harness the power of science and technology outputs so that we can bring up to the higher productivity levels that we need to have. Industrialization, we need to learn lessons from our ASEAN member economies agri-industrialization has been a key major pillar of any ASEAN member economy like Thailand, Vietnam, and others. We will need to have to improve our export development prospects and improving the post-harvest processing, logistics, and marketing support. Down the line, the fourth pillar is called professionalization. You know, we have an aging population in the department. In the same manner that there is aging population in the farming sector. Farmers are now averaging about 60 years old. We need to bring in the younger generation to come forward, not only to engage in farming, but also to engage in agribusiness. We need to educate and bring the right expertise. And agribusiness management is one expertise that we need to increase, elevate. And I believe that if you need to activate, have more cooperatives, we need professional managers to really help the farming community, the farmers' cooperatives for that matter. And government has to really be guided always by ease of doing business and transparent procurement and no to corruption. Let me emphasize that. That's professionalization. I have committed myself. I have been bashed openly, but I am standing because I have that will to implement no to corruption. So with all this properly done, timely done, we are hoping to get this 2021 target growth of 2.5% towards that vision of a food secure and resilient Philippines with empowered and prosperous farmers and fisherfolk. So marami pong salamat. Let's plan, plan, plan. More than ever, this is the time to really elevate, accelerate, upscale our game. Thank you very much.
I'm very glad to have this opportunity to have this conversation with people who are focused on agribusiness. And we have received such a comprehensive presentation from the Secretary. I will focus on a few of the important ideas that he presented to us. The first has to do with our expectation for the economy in 2021. You know, in contrast with my usual reputation as a prophet of boom, probably I'm the most pessimistic about 2021 as regards GDP growth. It's not possible for us to attain figures like 6-7% that have been bandied around from the very beginning of this year. In fact, from the very beginning of this year, I said we will not be able to grow beyond 4% for the whole year. And most of that will be really coming in the last quarter. And I think the reason is obvious. We are mismanaging our response to the pandemic. The vaccines are coming too late. And I don't want to go on and on with the deficiencies of our government in addressing the pandemic problem. So I expect a lot more lockdowns, unfortunately, before the year is over. And that will really cripple our number one engine of growth, which is consumption. But I'd like precisely to highlight what the Secretary mentioned. Last year, as we all know, when the whole economy dropped by 9.5%, agriculture dropped only by minus 0.2%. And this reminds me of the other hero sector we have in the economy, the remittances from OFWs, as I'm sure for those of us who are following these remittances, because they're so important precisely for consumption expenditures, the drop in remittances was only minus 0.8%, approximating the great performance of agriculture. And I will now venture to say that if the economy grows at 4% for the whole of 2021, I think agriculture will grow by 3%. So, Mr. Secretary, you are conservative. I think the growth of agriculture, seeing all the things that you are doing, I think a 3% growth, which we achieved in the past, one of the highest, is possible for 2021. Among other reasons, one of the very positive effects of the pandemic is that all of us in all sectors of the economy are convinced that food security is the number one priority for the country. So finally, when I used to refer to agriculture for many decades as the Cinderella of development, constantly being neglected, sometimes criminally, now we see everyone is focused. And I'm saying this not to flatter the Secretary. Fortunately, we have the right person leading it. Now, let me focus, first of all, on the two most important products as far as hectareage of agriculture is concerned. Out of the 14.1 million hectares of agricultural land, we know that rice accounts for 4.4 million, while coconut accounts for 2.6 million. So first, let me comment on some of what the Secretary said about rice. First of all, I would like to defend very strongly the rice tariffication program. Many times, the Secretary and other people supporting that move are criticized. And I'm so glad that he mentioned that we're now 90% self-sufficient. But I, together with some of our colleagues in the University of Asia Pacific, have been for literally decades, since the 1980s, been telling our politicians that it was wrong for us to try to strive for self-sufficiency. You know, one of our agribusiness economists was in the World Bank when they helped Malaysia develop a long-term strategy for agriculture. And in the 1980s, the Malaysian leaders already realistically accepted the fact that they will never be self-sufficient in rice, considering their neighbors, Vietnam and Thailand, with so much water facilities. And so they just accepted the commonsensical conclusion that we will be self-sufficient in that period, 70% in rice, and the rest we will import from our neighbors who are more competitive. And what will we do with our land? We will plant higher value commodities like palm oil, rubber, and other fruit trees, and the rest is history. Malaysia became the number one power in palm oil production. We should have decided that long ago, and if we had the right investments in infrastructure, we would have gone beyond bananas and pineapples in exporting high-value products all over the world. But that's the past. Now, that brings me to what can be done in this 3.6 million hectares of coconut. I'm very glad the Secretary included diversification, especially in coconut. But the first thing that has to be done is to coordinate with the leadership in the Department of Agrarian Reform so that we can undo the many mistakes that were made in the implementation of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. There's no way we can improve productivity in that sector, accounting for 3.6 million hectares, if we don't, in coordination with the Department of Agrarian Reform, facilitate the reconsolidation of farms so that they can reach economies of scale and diversify into cacao, coffee, and other intercrops, and produce higher value products from coconut, like coconut water, coconut milk, all the many diversified products that are very much wanted, especially for health reasons, by the world. But that cannot be done if the small coconut farms are individually managed. They have to adopt what I'm sure the Secretary was very much exposed to in Malaysia, the nucleus estate system, where a large corporation, whether state or private, will work together with thousands of smallholders and help them plant palm oil, rubber, and in our case, coconut. And I'm sure you already are aware that there are a few outstanding examples of this model right now in the Philippines. One is in Misamis Oriental, another one is in Brooks Point, Palawan, already engaging thousands of small coconut farmers and actually precisely coming out with those high value products that I referred to. And this can also make possible the intercropping, since we also have a lot of potentials in cacao and coffee. I'm sure the Secretary knows that Kennemer already has 2,000 hectares in Palawan where they are planting cacao. And I'm always impressed with what Vietnam has done over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, they were not a player in the coffee market. Today, because of very appropriate policies of the state in Vietnam, they are now actually surpassing Brazil in the export of coffee to the world, and very good coffee, as we know in the Philippines. The revolution which replaced labor with machines. What is so difficult in providing these palay farmers with dryers? And we can go on and on this neglect. In a way, I see a positive trend where most of the budget of the government in Build is not being spent in Metro Manila or Metro Cebu. I see that more and more of them are in the countryside, including, of course, the farm to market roads. And this is something that we should be glad about. If Manila or Cebu want to have better skyways and so on and so forth, subways, let Ramon Ang, let Manny Pangilinan, let all these private sector investors do it through PPP. But the government's budget in infrastructure should be focused on the countryside. And this will address, to a great extent, the problem of farm productivity in the palay sector. And finally, I'd like also to refer to the need for managers. So when I talked about the plantitos and plantitas, I'm referring to people who will actually produce these high-value crops in urban farms. But we also need a lot more people who can manage, for example, these estates of coconut and other products in a very professional way. This is where I go to the item of professionalization. We may have a good number already of scientists coming from Los Baños, but we have a dearth of managers who understand the whole agribusiness chain. And therefore, we need schools, whether it's AIM, Ateneo, etc., to get into programs that will produce agribusiness managers. This was done at Harvard more than 50 years ago. We need to do that now in our university system. They don't even have to be degree programs. They can be short executive education courses that will take people who are already professionals, whether it be engineers, whether it be scientists, whether it be even lawyers, but who have an inclination towards agribusiness, and let's train them in the field of agribusiness management. We will need them in a big way in the coming years as we address more and more the issue of food security.
It's my great pleasure to join all of you today in this forum with the title Prospects of Agriculture beyond the COVID pandemic. And this is indeed a very timely platform for discussion on the prospective state of one of our most vital sectors as we navigate toward a possible ending of this pandemic. And the world is in its grip for over a year now. And if there's one thing that this pandemic should have impressed on us all, it is the importance of the agricultural sector. It reminded us how much of a necessity agricultural goods and services are, especially during times of this crisis. Indeed, agriculture, as we all know, talagang naging backbone siya ng Philippine economy. Kaya may pandemic man o walang pandemic. And you have seen how Secretary Dar has shown us the figures. No? So even after this pandemic, it is all the more we have to ensure that Philippine agriculture does not have to fall on the wayside, as has happened so many times before. We must maintain the momentum gained by initiating long-term policy reforms, as what Secretary Dar and Dr. Villegas has mentioned. All the more drumming up budgetary and resource support for this important sector. Most importantly, we must craft and implement agricultural programs that work, that are science and evidence-based, sustainable, inclusive, and I dare say, future-proof. Dr. Dar and Dr. Villegas mentioned how we can harness the higher education system, state universities and colleges, in future-proofing the agricultural sector. And as the national university focused on the agriculture, we at the UPLB is committed to the development of Philippine agriculture, together with other agricultural universities in the country, in partnership with the Department of Agriculture and other national government agencies, local government units, and the private sector. We wholeheartedly support the inclusive market-oriented development frameworks espoused by Secretary Dar, which focuses the entirety of the agribusiness value chain, as mentioned by Dr. Villegas, toward fulfilling the shifting needs of both local and global markets. I believe that adopting this framework will ensure a robust agricultural sector in the long run that will thrive past the pandemic. But of course, this will require a degree of adaptability and flexibility, which needs to be worked on. Embracing digital technologies and applying them to key points in the agribusiness value chain will be critical for success. And I can empathize with Dr. Villegas when he saw this rice being seen in the highways. No? Whenever I go back to Pangasinan, I can still see a lot of roads being, filled with this rice. So it's really not really to be pessimistic, but the agricultural sector, we have to be optimistic, especially in this time of pandemic. And here at UPLB, we have initiated projects and programs. For instance, we have the SARAI, the SARAI, or the smarter approaches to reinvigorate agriculture as an industry in the Philippines is one such application using weather data, satellite information, agronomic data, market data, farmer profiles to develop decision support tools that will help answer questions such as when to plant, where, what variety to plant, what's the smartest way to irrigate, to fertilize, or to manage pests, what's the status of crop production or damages, and where to sell. Speaking on the last point, the agricultural sector needs to take advantage of the growing popularity of the digital marketplaces, as we have seen during this pandemic. These online platforms were already on the rise prior to the pandemic, which has only highlighted how convenient they are. With better support mechanisms in place, online marketplaces can only continue to grow, to thrive. And we must find a way to integrate them into the Philippine agribusiness value chain in a way that allows all stakeholders to benefit. As is evident, collaboration and innovation are the two key values that we must focus on in moving forward. Innovation in logistics and agricultural products, innovation in agricultural risk mitigation through better decision-making tools and financing, and even innovation in business models that address the small and the very fragmentary nature of Filipino farm holdings, all implemented through the unified efforts of the Department of Agriculture, the academe, and the private sector. And there are two possible models of innovations that we can suggest. First, as again mentioned by Dr. Villegas, the agribusiness clusters. And second, community-supported agriculture. Once again, the answer here is collaboration, infrastructure and support from the national government, research on possible export niches from the academe, and active investments from the private sector on these areas and products. Dr. Villegas mentioned the bigger companies owned by the conglomerates. And through a goal-oriented collaboration, we can build a Philippine agricultural sector that is global in scale, in scope, and reach. One that is enticing to future generations of farmers. And the latter point is important for us. We at the sector of higher education institutions, state universities and colleges, focusing on agricultural development. If we wish to ensure a future-proof agricultural sector, we must convince the youth to choose agriculture as a career. And we must make agriculture enticing, exciting, a thrilling prospect that is both financially rewarding and emotionally satisfying to pursue, not a burden. That is why we highlight agriculture as a degree program in our recruitment of the best and the brightest. This is my response to Dr. Villegas, whether providing short-term training programs in agribusiness or formal degree programs, as he has mentioned, that was started by Harvard University. In fact, the agribusiness program model of Harvard was patterned was actually a model for the Department of Agribusiness and Management here in UPLP. And indeed, we want to make sure that we do not run out of valuable human resources. Focus on our country's most important sector, the agricultural sector. The previous Manila Times, I found out, your forum had Cherry Atilano of Agria and Jairus Ferrer of iFarms as the guest speakers. They and other young entrepreneurs in the agricultural sectors like them, they must be given more exposure so that other young people can be inspired to follow their example. Aside from our recruitment program, UPLB, in collaboration with other state universities on agriculture, we are doing our part in this endeavor by constantly improving and revamping our curriculum to make it more updated and suited to the youth. From the course content, applications, and our teaching methodologies, we engage our students in promoting agriculture evidence-based related research, technologies, and knowledge products that the university produces. Even when this pandemic is over, we must not forget that beyond this pandemic lies the global challenge of ensuring food security and nutrition for an ever-growing population, which has shown by Secretary Dar in terms of its impact on poverty, on employment. Demand for food supplies will continue to increase even as production grows more difficult due to the worsening effects of climate change. And the fourth industrial revolution mentioned by Dr. Villegas gives us solutions to this challenge in the form of bioengineered crops, digital farm management tools, and other development of new technologies mentioned by Secretary Dar, precision agriculture, smart agriculture. Thus, agriculture and food production will continue to remain relevant. But at the same time, we must ensure that it will continue to be a priority, especially in terms of policy and budgetary support. To end, allow me to reiterate that through focus and collaborative effort, including this initiative by Manila Times, we shall work hard to create a sustainable, inclusive, and I dare say again, a future-proof Philippine agricultural sector. Maraming pong salamat.